we might as well get started. I know I'll give people wow, a couple minutes. We'll give people a minute to come on in. Yeah, and I think you guys you sit wherever you want. Or no, I guess it comes up on the computer. I think it's fine. Yeah, so that's how I always have to make sure my car hasn't gone through before. But never just leave it unlocked. Never break it into or whatever. Adam.
Pretty good. No, there's no problem whatsoever.
It's already on the.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
there's no problem.
Feel free to sit up here. Okay. Alrighty, I think we might as well get started. It's 2 minutes after 7, so let's be considerate of people's time. So thank you all for coming. We're going to lead with the pledge, and then Susie has a couple of things that she wants to mention, and then we will hear from our representatives. So if everybody could, flags over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Susie, do you need to?
Okay, last night we had our BWI roundtable, and just to let you know, the closures of the airport runway 28 and 10 starts today. You may hear a little bit more noise, and it's only supposed to go on until May 16th, but that's all dependent on the weather. The next big announcement is there's a new MAA director, Shanita Griffin. So the MAA annual report will be posted on their website probably next week, because we were the first ones to see it. And from the changes we saw in September, there were some major differences, but they're going to do more in-depth studies to see exactly what happened where. And also, too, the most, I don't know if you're interested in this, but the most flown aircraft was the Boeing 737-800 series. The second was the Boeing 737-700 series. And the third most flown aircraft is the Boeing 737 MAX 8 series. And just to let you know, the BWI Roundtable, I'm drafting a letter on behalf of them to send to congratulate Ms. Griffin on her appointment, and also to invite her to our meetings and open invitation. And our technical committee, I'm on the communications committee, the technical committee is going to be having a meeting with the MAA people and possibly meeting her then. So if anybody wants to be interested, this is a layout of the airport. I got to put the microphone down. We're up here, and this is the runway that's being closed. So you might hear a little bit of noise, you may or may not. But
why are they closing the runway?
they're doing maintenance
There's
work.
maintenance on the runway?
It's maintenance on the runway, and there's peripheral work being done too.
Oh, okay.
So that is what's happening. And if you have any noise complaints, if you don't want to go online and register them, you can let me know. Or and Dan couldn't be here tonight. And there's no updates on from the Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit as far as the SC Maglev. It's still on hold. So and we still are working on getting hold of Sean Duffy to talk to him about it. So we'll see what happens, and I'll keep you all up to date on both of those. And if Dan's here, he couldn't be here tonight. You know, we will keep you up to date. But like I said, if you have any noise complaints, let me know. Okay? Did anybody have any questions? Yes. It's there. Because this morning when I went online, it wasn't there. So they must have just put it on. So, yeah, so now you can go on the MAA website and look at the annual report. And there, it was a excellent report. They did very in-depth things, but now they're going to narrow it down because the changes that we recommended that the FAA okayed went into effect in September. So we want to see the differences from before September and after, and we only saw basically the one where the east-west departures switched. They reversed, which was good for the Elk Ridge area. So anyway, I will turn it back to Casey. Thank you. Kara.
I get all kinds of names. Anyway, okay, we are very pleased to have with us our two of our delegates, Mark Chang and Sandy Bartlett, and Senator Pam Beidel. So to talk a little bit about various things going on in Annapolis, including the budget and the end of the most recent session. So Delegate Chang, I thought you were going first, or were you going first?
Okay. Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the kind invitation for Senator Beidel, Delegate Bartlett, and myself to be able to present to the Linthicum Shipley Improvement Association about the 2025 legislative session. My focus, part of the presentation will be on the budget, which has really had a lot of focus during this session, and my colleagues, they will talk about other policy matters that were very important during the session. It was a very busy session. It was unprecedented, actually. And so we had a lot of focus on what's going on in our fiscal climate and really what's going on in Washington, how that has affected Linthicum, Anne Arundel County, and the state of Maryland. The last time we were here was when the new administration on a federal level had just entered office, and we talked a little about the serious concerns about how the actions of the new administration was going to have adverse effects on our state's economy and our communities. Unfortunately, those comments that we made during that time at our last meeting here have really come to effect. And it's not something we really we're excited about, but it's something that we were really paying attention to, and we continue to monitor very closely. Obviously, there's a lot of fluidity and a lot of volatility right now that's going on the federal level that has affected our state's economy. However, there's a lot of confidence, though, I can say, in our state's leaders, specifically Senator Beidel, who serves as the chair of the Finance Committee, and also Delegate Sandy Bartlett, who serves as the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. And these are two leaders in both houses who are really focused on, in addition to fiscal matters, policy issues that really affect all our state's residents and really how we interact on the federal level. As was mentioned the last time we were here, we talked about how for generations, Maryland really benefited from the amount of federal assets that we have in our state, and also with how much we have really, with our proximity to Washington, D.C., and really the positive impacts that have happened from the federal level. However, now there's a lot of adverse effects. You all hear it about the thousands of jobs that have been cut, and these are families. These are individuals trying to provide for their families. These are our neighbors. These are people in our communities. These are faces that we see. And Senator Beidel, Delegate Bartlett, and myself, we see it on a daily basis. We get the phone calls about those who are just fired instantaneously. And these are women and men who've dedicated their lives and career of public service. And instantaneously overnight, because of actions that are just really unprecedented, they're really affecting our state. And so the data that we have from our state is we have a Board of Revenue estimates, and we also have a Department of Legislative Services that's a career professional team, and they provide us real-time data as much as they can, and really working with the other agencies like the Comptroller of State of Maryland, the governor, and really providing us as members of the legislature information where we can act upon and make those decisions to really try to help mitigate the effects that are happening in our state and our communities. There are about 200,000 households in our state who claim federal wages through their taxes. So that's represents about 8% of our general revenues. So it's a significant impact on our state's economy because of the income tax sources that we get from those federal workers. Now that's just civilian. And there's classified ones that we don't know about. And, unfortunately, we heard about what happened with the head of the National Security Agency recently. So there's still a lot of moving parts going on. But you can be assured that from the governor to your members in the state legislature, we're really working tirelessly to be able to fight for Maryland and also to really protect our state's assets and interests. During the previous administration, President Biden's administration, Maryland was awarded the FBI headquarters, the new FBI headquarters. Now that's on hold. And so that's something that, again, is going to affect our state and really what the direction of our state's going to be. With all that said, there's been a lot of focus right now and also for the past 90 days in our session about the budget and where we are. And back in January, where we came in a $3 billion deficit with a multi-billion-dollar structural deficit. And the $3 billion deficit we're talking about is this fiscal year coming up that starts July 1st. And in the structural deficit, those are commitments that we as a state make to be able to support ongoing commitments into the future. And so that's something that, as we go through this presentation, talk about what is structural versus what is the current fiscal situation right now. So with the fiscal 2026 budget that was worked out, we were able to work together with the governor, with the majority party, the minority party, everybody working together with the 24 different counties, with this, really trying to look out for all 6.5 million Marylanders. So we have a PowerPoint slide that we're going to go through. And if we could do this, go through the slides, they all build upon each other. And then at the very end, we'll hold questions, and then we can go through any questions that you may have. And thank you so much to Adam for the prep work and being able to help with these slides. And also thank you to Madam President Kara Morris for all the pre-game work that we had to get everything established. And we do have hard copies. We're trying to limit to one per household just to be environmentally sustainable. And, we're going with the spirit. It's tough times out there right now, so we got some budget cuts going on. But with that, we're going to go ahead and go through the slides here. And then if anybody wants a copy of the slides, we can have those emailed. This is also being live streamed. So thank you very much to the LSIA team for providing that. And actually, too, appreciate any grace with this, too. We try to do our homework ahead of time. So this is actually a draft of this was produced about a week ago. And this was a week before session ended, just to kind of get ahead of it. Session just ended Monday at midnight. So we're, still kind of really, trying to recover from all that. But we really try to get our homework done as much as possible and being able to provide the best quality report that we can. So going through this. The overall operating budget is a $67 billion operating budget and about a $6 billion capital budget. The capital budget includes about $3 billion in projects from our hospitals to our schools to our community groups to other types of infrastructures. And then the rest of $3 billion, the other half is for transportation-related projects. So what happens is that July 1st, 2026, the budget's going to start. And so that's where the budget that we just passed on Monday is going to go into effect. And what happens is, prior to that, just fast forward the clock a little bit, by the end of this summer, early fall, the governor and his team is going to start formulating the fiscal 2027 budget. And that entails working with the 24 different agencies in the state of Maryland, meeting with all 24 jurisdictions to find out what their priorities are, and also just hearing from members of the legislature and the community and residents and really shaping what next year's budget looks like. But with regard to this, is the governor releases the budget, and this is an odd year. So odd years, the House has the budget first. Next year will be an even year. So Senator Bidel and her chamber will have the budget first in their possession. So going on this year, the House committee, we received the budget from the governor, and then the House committee did it work, and then it went to the committee budget to the floor, and then the House votes the budget to the Senate. So what we did was, after we received the budget from the governor, we made different adjustments to it, and we'll go through those adjustments. And then once that happened, it went over to the Senate. Then the Senate committee, which is budget and tax, on the House side, it's appropriations that deals with as far as where the appropriations get made, and then Ways and Means deals with taxes and revenues. So they're split on the House side, but one side on the Senate's budget and tax. The committee then passes the budget to the Senate floor on the Senate side, and the Senate passes their budget, and then there's going to be differences. So, for example, there may be, let's say, $100,000 for a project in Linthicum that the Senate has and the House doesn't have it. Well, these are types of things we iron out in the conference committee, and then so we've got to get everything aligned with the House and the Senate, and then the governor signs a budget, and then beginning in fiscal year of 2026, July 1st, that's when the budget goes and gets implemented and executed. Next slide. Okay, so talk about the overall state's revenues. $40 billion is what comes on from revenues that we actually accrue from the state level. And then about $20 billion comes from the federal level. Now, as mentioned earlier, that because of the really volatile situation that's happening on the federal level, those cuts are starting to really affect on the state level. And for example, that part of the $3 billion deficit that we experience or have actualized is because of the new president coming in and making those adverse actions. And that has really affected about, actually right off the bat, 600 million right there. And then the amount of jobs that are being affected, that's going to put pressure on our unemployment infrastructure and those things. And so that's how it really, the $20 billion that's come from the federal level, we're going to really be watching that closely, because that's going to be a lot less than what it was before. So with regards to here is individual income taxes, about $14 billion. We have our sales and use tax. We have our corporate taxes, our state lottery, our general fund transfers. And then we have our federal funds right here, about $19 billion. And then we have special funds. Those special funds are different funds that come from different types of programs and fees and such. And then we have higher education. That comes from like your tuition and those types of fees that come through the higher education system as part of the state of Maryland. Next slide. Okay, and then with regards to where does the money go? So the money comes in, so what do we do as a state? Majority of it goes to health. So about $22 billion goes to areas of health, Medicaid, and other programs like that. Next is elementary and secondary education, about $12 billion. Higher education is about $9 billion. Transportation, $6 billion. Public safety, down here about $4 billion. And then other types of government services, about $1.2 billion. That's like your Maryland General Assembly and other types of agencies like that. And legislative, judicial, legal, and public debt. And so this is where the money comes in. So last slide we saw where the money comes from. This is where the money goes. So as you can see, it's pretty tight. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we looked in the past with regards to federal funding. 2022, 33% of our state's budget came from federal funding. However, we get down to 2025, and it significantly decreases. and in 2026, it decreases even more. Part of what happened was what really helped us during COVID and the pandemic is we had the American Rescue Plan, the COVID-19 Pandemic Relief Act, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. All those different funds really helped stabilize our state's economy, not just in Maryland, but all across the country. And then that really helped us as a state rebound from the pandemic. However, what's different now is that the funding that we received in the past, we don't really have that federal partner anymore in the White House. So that's a really big concern. I mentioned about the thousands of jobs that have already been affected adversely. And if that continues to increase like that, that's really going to put a lot of pressure on our unemployment system and our unemployment structure. As a state, it's uncertain whether or not we're going to be able to handle that. Before, during the pandemic, when we had those high numbers of unemployment, we had the federal government helping us. So that's something that we're really closely monitoring. So that's what the federal component looks like. Next slide. So in fiscal 2023, the one-time spending went to capital projects. For example, the Linthicum Women's Club, they just did a major renovation over there, and there was some funds that were given over there. There were the Veterans Memorial, they received funding during that time. And so these are some of the local projects that helped with the capital projects. That was one-time spending, OTO. We also raised the rainy day fund. We really made the rainy day fund robust to be able to prepare for times like this. We didn't know this was coming. Well, fortunately, we had a rainy day fund that was able to help mitigate some of what we're going through right now. The investments in Blueprint for Maryland's Future, that's the comprehensive educational reform package that we recently passed, state employee bonuses, and cybersecurity enhancements. So those are the one-time only spending components that we had made in fiscal 2023. Long-term investments, tax relief for Marylanders, provider rate increases. These are provider rates for individuals who work with professionals who work with individuals with developmental disabilities and other types of programs there. So those are the provider rate increases, because providing direct support is a tough job, and it's a very special person who has compassion, who's able to help those special needs individuals. We really believe in supporting them. And also recovery assistance for healthcare providers, arts and tourism grants. We have a great state. We got a lot of attractions here, so we've put money into our arts and tourism program to continue to make Maryland robust in that area. Increased cash assistance benefits, the autism waiver, victims of crime. These are for individuals who experience very violent crimes of sexual assault and domestic violence and those types of crimes there. And we also expanded Medicaid for dental benefits to adults. And then there was the expansion for capacity to serve people experiencing a mental health crisis. And as we all know, that continues to be an important issue that we as a society continue to deal with. Next slide. So in 2024, Maryland's revenues were higher than expected thanks to the federal aid that was mentioned earlier, and inflation, again, creating a state surplus. So that's how we got the state surplus, because of the federal funding and also because of other components that really helped make our state surplus robust. Okay. During the 2023 session, the legislature increased funding, as I mentioned earlier, with the Empower Education, the Blueprint, which was $900 million. It transformed transportation, the Red Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. Since those areas of the state are right outside of Washington, D.C., Charles County is the most wealthiest minority county in our state, in our country. So really, because of its proximity to Washington, D.C., there is that really need for transportation down there. As members of the legislature, Delegate Bartlett, Senator Bidel, myself, we all represent this area. Our district's always first, but as members of the state legislature, we look at comprehensively the whole state and being able to make sure all Marylanders win. Also boosting small business, the Cannabis Business Assistance Fund, and strengthening emergency response support for our emergency medical systems operations fund. We got a lot to be proud of in the state of Maryland. We had the world's best trauma team in the world, University of Maryland Shock Trauma. And that is not because of accidents, because of choices that we make as a state, because of the investments we make. And If any one of us, and I'm sure there are many testimonies in this room or you know of people that have gone to shock trauma, and 98% of those patients who go to shock trauma in an ambulance or in a helicopter or get there any other way, they come out that front door and go back home to their families. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of the investments that this state has made and will continue to make. Okay, securing financial future, participating in state supplemental retirement plan. So those are where the different increased funding went 2023 session. Next slide. Okay, without a cash surplus in fiscal 2025, these are options we have. We got to cut the structural deficit. We got to have responsible budgeting. We also have to raise critical revenue. So these are the options that we had during this session to be able to deal with the different, really deal with our budget. So this is what happens when we don't have a cash surplus like we had in the past. So these are the options that we have. So looking at the structural deficit, as I mentioned earlier, those are the commitments that we have in the out years. Fortunately, if we look at fiscal 2026, as I mentioned, it was about a $3 billion deficit. However, we were able to address it by cuts and also by revenues. And we'll get into those cuts and revenues in a little bit more detail. But if we look down the road in fiscal 2028, 2029, and fiscal 30, the structural deficit really increases. And what are we going to do about it? We're going to talk about it. And these are things that we as a state are really working on now during our present time to be able to focus on that to really grow in Maryland's economy. That way these structural deficits would not be there. But these are something that's really of great concern that we continue to monitor very closely. Okay, the current problem. So what we had during this session is we had a cash deficit, we had a lack of federal funding, and we had the stagnant economic growth. And that stagnant economic growth continues to be a threat right now with the economy and the amount of federal workforce and also all the other businesses, small businesses that are affected by contractors. And then in fiscal 2028, the problem or what was really needed is we need general funds to be able to support this blueprint fund. So that's something that we're looking at down the road to be able to address. Next slide. Okay, why can't we just cut more spending? That's what we hear. They're like, Mark, you got to cut the fat. Why can't you just cut more? Why can't you just cut this, and this? No. I'm going to say this. No, we're not doing that. As I mentioned earlier, you hear about, the decisions at the White House, just cutting jobs, cutting our neighbors' jobs, people being unemployed who are friends or neighbors who live around us. That's inhumane. That's not dignified. That's not how we treat people in 2025. So that's why we just can't cut more spending. And I'll give you specific examples of what that would look like. We made about $1 billion, almost $2 billion in cuts, but we're looking for additional cuts. So they said, well, can't you just cut more? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if we were looking for another $1 billion in cuts, we would abolish the Maryland Department of Labor. We would abolish the Maryland State Library Agency. We would abolish the Department of Natural Resources, that's your state parks. We would abolish the Juvenile Services Department to help our kids. That would abolish the Maryland Department of Commerce that really deals with trying to get our economy robust and innovative. And the legislative branch, that's more personal. That's $165 million. So, we do make cuts there, but it would abolish us. I wouldn't be here right now, okay? So I'm very appreciative of, really being able to have this. Next slide. Also, on a serious note, child care subsidy, that's $328 million. State support for local health departments, $116 million. Guaranteed access grant scholarships, $99 million. That's to help our kids, our young people, be able to go to college and finish college and get into the workplace. And also non-public placement programs, $149 million. That comes out to more than $1 billion right there. So if you're hearing out on the streets that, Chang, he just needs to cut more, well, you know what? If we did more cuts, all this would be gone. So really have that resonate. And I'll tell you what, we're going to take the show on the road. And if you want us to come out to talk to people, we'll talk to people and we'll let them know that's what it looks like. You know, we're not going to cut nurses. We're not going to cut professionals who are helping our kids. We're not going to cut state parks. You know, that's the real tangible effect that we would have. Next slide. Child care subsidy helps people who, with regards to daycare and being able to provide grants for those individuals. For families who are trying to get their kids into daycare and also program for child care. Okay, we're going to continue to go through this and then we'll take questions at the end. I'm not going to answer that question. That's a ridiculous question. Why would you not fund child care? Okay, so going back on, what does this budget do on no cuts? What it does, it takes $1.2 billion of the governor's $1.3 billion in BRFA spending cuts. BRFA is the Budget Reconciliation Finance Act. That's what we've got to do to make up our budget balance. And then also takes an additional $574 million in cuts. So that's what that does there. Next slide. Okay, so personal income tax. As I mentioned earlier, that what's really good about this is that from this fiscal year, really what we're going to see is that overall, 94% of Marylanders, they're not going to experience any increases in their income tax. As you can see down here, where the income tax increase rises, this goes to 6.25% for those making over $500,000 and 6.5% for those in excess of $1 million. So that's where, again, this is what the current law is. And then this is what initially came in as we saw the flow chart from the very beginning of what the governor was proposing, and this is what the compromise rate. So as you can see, this is part of the whole sausage making process, is that's where these different rates have come in. So those who are making over $500,000, that's where they'll see the increase in the income tax revenues there. And then also, this is the joint head of household. And so those who are 600 and 1.2 million. So that's where those increased income tax revenues come from. Next slide. Standard deduction also increases by 20%. So those who use the standard deduction, that's going to increase by 20% there. And also we're going to be phasing out the itemized deduction for federal adjusted AGI above $200,000 by applying 7.5 phase out factor. So you get the standard deduction increase, and then the AGI over 200,000, that's where the phase out happens with the itemized deductions. Next slide. Okay, with the Maryland personal income tax reform, again, only 20% of Marylanders itemize on their taxes, and these are the most common deductions that occur. So we looked at it, we saw that from the comptroller's office, we worked with them and realized that 20% of the Marylanders had used that itemized deduction. So we thought that this would be a good route to take as far as being able for revenue sources. Next slide. Okay, 94% of Marylanders will see a decrease or no change in their income tax under this proposal. And that was from the two charts ago that we just showed. So if you're over 500 or over 500, over 1.2, that's where the increases occur. But other than that, no changes in your income taxes. Next slide. Transportation, big issue. So many times, Senator Bidel, Delegate Bartlett, myself, we always get calls about potholes, we hear about roads, we hear about different types of infrastructure needs. These are where the transportation revenues that we're going to be seeing increases on. Increase the excise tax on vehicles. Actually, because, again, doing our homework a week earlier, or myself doing my homework a little bit week earlier, it's actually 6.5, not 6.8. And then the registration fees, that's going to be accelerated on the annual registration from Class A So those right there. And then your VEEP, your emissions, that will go from 14 to 30. And then your historic tags, short-term rental vehicles, and certificate titles. So these are all dedicated to the Transportation Trust Fund. Transportation revenue specifically deal with that. Next slide. Okay, additional revenues. What we did was also worked with the local jurisdictions to be able to have the income tax rate increased by 0.1%. Cap gains. So for those with over 300,000, there's a 2% capital gains on there, and 1.25% of that goes to general funds. The 0.75, that's going to go to the Transportation Trust Fund. Also, ends of sale tax for sales of photographic artistic materials. Sports wagering goes from 15 to 20. Cannabis, it goes to 12% in 2025. Also, combined reporting. We thought this was important for us to be able to capture those corporate dollars that were actually not coming to us through the state. And then also current law for table games, and then apply sales tax to vending machines. So those are the types of revenue sources, additional revenue sources that we voted on and also worked out. Now, some of the options that were presented that we didn't take, and again, really appreciate everyone following us during session, following the General Assembly during session and different bills, and that, in February, March, it might be an idea put on the table. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to become law. So it's something that, if it's important to you, to follow it all the way through the process. Some of the important incentives that we do have as a state that we didn't take was there was the option to cut the back to school week sales tax, where the sales tax is exempt on clothing and shoes. We didn't take that. We decided to keep that there, so that still exists. And then there was an option to have a tax on snack foods. We didn't take that. And then there was the 0.75% on delivery fees. We didn't take that. So these are types of options that were presented that we didn't take. There was the sugary drinks tax fee or tax proposal. We didn't take that one either. That would have netted us about $400 million in revenues, but we didn't take that. So a lot of the feedback that we've got from residents, and really those from the business sector and private sector, and also as individuals, that really helped shape what we decided to do as far as revenues. Next slide. Okay, what does this mean for the general fund? It means that we have $1.3 billion in revenues. We have $1.6 billion in general fund cuts. We have $358 million in cash balance, and we have also a $9 million in structural balance. So all those different actions that we took on the cuts and the revenues, that's where it puts us. We also have $2.5 billion in our rainy day fund, and that really puts us in good footing, great footing actually, with our rating agencies, Moody's and all Fitches and all of them. And we really have been able to keep a strong rating system because of our financial health, but also having that rainy day fund and cash on hand helps us weather any other helps to weather the uncertainties that are coming our way through other actions from the federal government. Next slide. Okay, capital investments. So we talked about all that was operating. So that's the $67 billion operating budget. That's all cash. The capital, that's your brick and mortar. That's a combination of cash, also a combination of bonds. The bond market, we're really strong. We get a lot of bond premium back because of the strong investments that we make as a state. And so, as was mentioned earlier, that some of the other projects that were funded right here in Linthicum is the Benson Hammond House, Linthicum Women's Club, the tennis courts back here, Delegate Bartlett sponsored, and Senator Bidle. These are projects that right here, our trails, our parks. So those are your capital investments, and those are investments that we've made over the years. So this fiscal year, what capital investments did we make? Senator Bidle was the lead on the BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport visitor experience. Really showcases the great airport that we have, and so really as visitors come here, they can really experience the different amenities and other types of important historical information that we have about our state. We have Glenmurray High School's planning study. Glenmurray High School is the oldest high school in the county. So there is working with Councilwoman Pickard. That was a really important project for her. Also for me, it's my alma mater. So, we work together on that to be able to get that funded. Then there's the Glen Burnie Center, Medicine and Behavioral Health. Senator Bidel and myself both visited that over the winter. It's the Chase Brexton part of the clinic over there, and that's off of Hospital Drive. We made investments there. Arcade of Central Chesapeake, that's right over here off of Nursery Road, helps individuals with special needs. Maryland City Fire Station, Delegate Bartlett was the lead on that. That helps with different types of renovations over there. Overlook Elementary School, they're getting a new sign over there, and that's right at neighbors to the north. Lindale Middle School, getting some new windows here. So that'll be really great to see that. And then the University of Maryland, Baltimore Washington Medical Center, this is to help with a different build out as far as critical care unit over there. So these are different types of capital investments that we've made locally. Now, there are a lot more out there. There's $3 billion of other investments that were made out there. If anybody's interested, they can take a look at what's in the capital budget for the state of Maryland. So that is the capital investment side. And then just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to get a little nerdy and wonky with this policy and fiscal stuff. I really love it. I really enjoy it. It's been really a blessing. I've served on the Appropriations Committee for 11 years and really get to see the entire state, but also bring it back home locally. So hopefully this was really helpful and beneficial to you. I would say this, that, the presentation that you've seen today, to please, share it with others. And if anybody wants us to come out and talk with them and share this information, we'd love to. Sometimes on social media, they put stuff out there and, that one-liner. But if you really dig deeper into the details like this, I think you really get a better comprehensive view of the really challenging decisions that we make as a state, but also believe the very critical investments that we make. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Okay. It's my great honor to introduce my state senator, Senator Pam Bidel, who serves as the chair of the Senate Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mark. Mark does a great job with the budget. I would probably glaze over doing the job he does, but if you have any budget questions, go to Mark. That's what I do. He's amazing. Thank you all. Thank you, Kara, for having us, and thank you, Adam, for running the slides. You did a great job. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And Susie, thanks for your update. I did meet with the new director of the airport, and we met with her the other morning before the governor announced. And my first question to her and to the Secretary of Transportation is, are we going to have someone that talks to the community and works with the community? Because we haven't had that for the last 8 years. So, yeah. So she has committed that she will do that. And she comes from the FAA, so she comes with really great experience. But I'm hoping we'll see some improvement there. So as chair of the Finance Committee, it's a little different. And I will tell you, this was my absolutely worst session that I've had in Annapolis. I've been in the Senate for 7 years. I've only been chair for 2. I really enjoyed it last year. This year, I worked really hard. So as chair, we heard almost 300 bills from the Senate, and then 200 crossed over from the House right after a crossover. So my committee heard almost 500 bills. And my job as chair is to schedule the hearings, to work with the analysts. We have 3 attorneys that we work with to amend bills or decide what bills we can pass, and then schedule floor reports and schedule the people that are going to report on the floor. But then I need to be ready in case one of my members doesn't stand up when they're supposed to and do a floor report. So I need to be familiar with every bill that's coming to the floor. So I love being chair, but it's tremendously stressful trying to herd 10 cats every day. But they love me. They tell me that. So I guess it's all going okay. But 10 senators. I said it's like herding cats. You've never heard that expression, Dennis, herding cats? I'll tell you a little bit about some of the work we did in the Finance Committee this year. And we do health. People think finance does budget. We don't. We do a lot of health care, a lot of business regulation. So insurance and banking and labor, collective bargaining, all those issues. The workforce with health care comes through us. So the big issue this year is the state has been on a total cost of care with health care for the last 8 years. I guess we're in the 9th year. it's very complicated, but it's how our hospitals get paid. And so they get paid with help from the federal government, another issue to be concerned about with federal funding. And they get paid on the quality of care. You know, if hospitals don't provide good quality of care, they make less money. If they have, actually, the hospitals that show they've had a decrease in patients get more money because it looks like they've done a better job. It might just mean the patients are going to another hospital. So that's been a really big issue for our large hospital systems like University of Maryland and Hopkins. But we're in the process of a new program. It's not going to be total cost of care. It's called the AHEAD model. And it's a very, very long name. But in the end, it's going to change how our hospitals are paid. And so the chair of Health and Government, Chair Penny Malnick, and I worked really closely with the hospitals and the HSCRC, which is where the rates are set, to get them talking to each other. I know it's a lot of acronyms. I see Kara smiling. It's a lot of acronyms, but working with trying to get them together to talk to each other so we can get rates set for our hospitals that allow them to continue to be successful. Right now, if our hospitals want to do a capital project, they have to come to us. Like Mark talked about BWMC, we got money for them this year. They have for domestic, well, not just domestic violence, but for rape victims. We have nurses trained at BWMC that we don't have in most hospitals in the state, but they don't have a private area where they can do the rape victims testing. And so not only do our nurses do help with rape victims, but they help other nurses in other hospitals. They get on like we do FaceTime and walk other nurses through how to do a good rape test kit. And so that's something that our hospital has done really well, and we provided some funding for them for a private room. $500,000 for the Tate Cancer Center to really help with the treatment center. So we all probably know somebody that's at Tate, has been to the Tate Center for chemotherapy and radiation. A lot of our constituents are there. But that money has to really come from the state budgets because the way our hospitals are getting paid, they don't have the money for capital projects. And so it really gets very complicated. The other thing my committee's worked on is the cost of prescription drugs. And there's a commission, PDAB, it's the, I get so used to acronyms, it's hard to say, Prescription Drug Affordability Board. And so they're looking at setting upper payment limits for certain drugs that are commonly used. Well, that sounds easy. Let's just limit the cost of drugs, right? Well, suppose drug companies decide they're not going to sell in Maryland because we're not paying them enough money. So we have to think through those things, and that's what the PDAB does. The prior governor, we passed the bill like 5 years ago, but the prior governor wouldn't fund the PDAB. So we've just gotten funding since Governor Moore's been in, and they're making some real progress. We have a new committee. I told Mark I think he's on it. He doesn't know yet, but to work with the federal government on the changes that are coming. And so it'll be 12 senators and 12 delegates, and they've appointed me as chair of finance, and I know as vice chair of budget and appropriations that Mark's going to be on it too. So read the press release, Mark. So that'll be a new committee as we work through the federal issues that are coming. Mark talked a little bit about Medicaid. You know, it's 25% of our budget that we, and Medicaid is not just for health care, but it also pays for people in nursing homes that don't have the money to be in nursing homes. And when it goes up 10%, which it did this year, it's already 25% of the budget and unexpectedly increases 10% for the cost of care. Then, where does that money come from? Well, it's going to have to come from new revenues. I'll tell you a little story. This is kind of what it's like to be in the legislature. I had a bill this year that was really important to me. I'll tell you up front, it didn't pass. Senate Bill 306. Senate Bill 306 was to put a fee schedule on the cost of medications that are for workman's comp. Now, we all have fee schedules with our drug programs, with our health insurance, but workman's comp doesn't have a fee schedule. So we have these companies that are charging whatever they want, really, truly, whatever they want for medications for workman's comp injuries. And so for our major counties like Anne Arundel, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, they're all self-insured. So they're paying these outrageous prices. In Prince George's County, medications that should have cost $2.5 million, they paid $10 million. So they paid almost $8 million more than the actual cost of drugs. So I learned a lot about prescriptions since I've been on this committee, but also my daughter is the president of the State Injured Workers Insurance Fund. And so she really helped provide a lot of information for me. And so I get it out of the Senate unanimously. All the counties want it. Maryland Association of Counties are helping me with it because it's going to save millions of dollars in the counties. It gets over to the House, and there's one chairman of a committee who's a workman's comp attorney. So guess what? The bill didn't pass, but it got worse. The one person who's making all this extra money, who charges like 5 times what the cost of drugs are, she decides to file an ethics complaint on me. Because my daughter's a workman's comp attorney, somehow I've put this bill in to help my daughter. It doesn't help my daughter financially. It doesn't help me financially. And not only that, but she defamed my daughter on Facebook. So now there's going to be a defamation of character suit. It gets worse. She sends someone who's on her website as being her community development person who follows me around the Senate with an iPad saying to me, well, how do you feel, Senator Bidle, that firefighters aren't going to get their cancer medications? I had to have a state trooper walk me from different meetings and conferences to get me to the floor of the Senate because this guy was literally in my face. So that's the fun side of being in the Senate of Maryland. I do all this for about 1/5 of what I used to make as my own business, so I must really like this job. But we're going to take care of that issue, and that there's going to be a fee schedule for workman's comp. And when we get done, I think this lady's going to wish she took my offer because it was going to be the cost plus 25%. But that wasn't good enough. Making 25% profit wasn't good enough. So it was really a stressful year this year. But I do love what I do. I think that we have done a lot of good things in the Maryland Senate. People like Mark and Sandy, we're there because we want to be there. We're there because we want to help our constituents. And I hope that you reach out to us when you need help. I've been working a little with Kara on some of the zoning issues. It's not even, we don't do that in the Senate or in the legislature, but we certainly can try to influence the county on some of these zoning issues. So I hope that we can do that. And on the blueprint, I know we have teachers in the room. I'd love to put just millions and millions of more dollars into education, but I don't know what we can do about financially how we're going to do that. What Mark showed you with the out years, most of that's the blueprint funding. So we need to find better ways to help our teachers, but I don't know that we can financially continue to support that. We're just going to have to see what happens. But the budget was an interesting process this year. I'm happy that I don't sit on the budget committee. I'm really happy that Delegate Chang sits on the budget committee. It came out very different than it started, didn't it? There were big cuts the governor was going to make that didn't happen, and other cuts had to be made. But we didn't nearly have the tax increases that were proposed, and I really thank Delegate Chang for his work on that. We really have a great delegation in District 32. So I'm going to bring up Delegate Sandy Bartlett, who's vice chair of Judiciary and does a great job in Judiciary. So we are lucky to have such significant leadership in District 32. So Delegate Bartlett.
Thanks, Senator Vidal. Thanks, Delegate Chang. So it's really great to be here tonight. Thank you for having us. And Kara, thank you. I just want to say, as the senator said, I am vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and I've only been vice chair for 2 years. It's been the first year. Let me just say, my chairman is a state prosecutor, and so he knows the law, practices the law in court all day long. I'm an attorney, and I never hardly go to court anymore. I try to stay up on the law, but as Senator Vidal was saying, the chair's responsibility is essentially to be acquainted with every single bill that comes to our committee. And with that said, we had at least 366 bills. Now, I don't know how many of the Senate side we had that came back, but I know we had 366 bills. So with that said, if my chair happens to step out of the room or step out of the floor session, guess who's got to now all of a sudden know or have some idea of every single bill and every single thing that's going on. So this year, I think my first year as vice chair, I think my chair was being kind. This year, my chair sort of felt like, okay, she's been there a year now. we're going to put her to work. And he did. He really did. But I enjoy it. As the senator said, we do this because we love it. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of bills that we had in judiciary. Some are actually warm and fuzzy. And I know this is a surprise to my colleagues because we never have warm and fuzzy bills in judiciary. It's always crime and punishment in my committee. But we had some bills dealing with pets, and it came from a constituent actually. And it's called Buddy's Law. There was someone who had their this isn't the warm and fuzzy part, but there was someone who had a pet, and that pet was shot, and so the medical expenses were higher than what we allow. So we raised that this year. It was $10,000. We've raised it to $25,000 because vet bills, if any of you have pets, vet bills have gone up considerably. And so now if someone injures your pet, you can sue them for up to $25,000 for your actual cost of medical care for your pet. Then we went a step further, and that is when you have a pet or livestock who is injured at the hands of someone else and you have to maybe put them down, that person can be criminally charged. The person could be criminally charged before, but the wording said that if their action, was sort of like a straight line, a direct line to the pet's death, we didn't have anything if the pet needed to be euthanized because of someone else. Like I said, we only go but so far in judiciary with warm and fuzzy. I'm sorry. I started warm and fuzzy with the pet part, and then, of course, it got gruesome. But we also passed a bill with respect to adult adoption. So sometimes adults want to be, someone has reached the age of majority and they want to be adopted. Essentially, they want to be separated from their biological parents. And you may say, why? Why would they want to do that? Well, a couple of reasons. They're an adult now, they're earning income, and their biological parent, who may have never been in the picture, who may have not taken care of them, who may have only provided trauma for them, could receive some of their assets. So we passed a law that said that we now allow adult adoption. Very important. I think this bill was introduced at least 2 or 3 times. We finally got it passed. Also, in line with parents, we passed a bill that says that a new excuse or further of an excuse for jury duty. Now, we want everyone to serve jury duty if you're able. But if you're a new parent and you're not getting a lot of sleep, right? And you may need to be home because you're excused from work, but you would have to go to jury duty. So what we decided was if you're a new parent and your child, I think, is 3 or under, you can be excused from jury duty. And so we have that. And if you're a nursing parent, you can be excused from jury duty. Also, we made provisions that the courts have to have an area to allow for nursing parents with a sink, because that was a thing that was happening. A lot of the parents didn't have sinks available. But anyway, we went there on that, and I think we've made it better. We heard testimony from various parents who needed the help of not having to serve jury duty because the excuses, none of the things fit. None of the excuses fit them. But if you're a parent and you want to be able to be home with your kid, and if you're a single parent and you have to be home with your kid, you definitely need to be excused from jury duty. We also passed a bill for law enforcement to allow for more confidentiality with respect to a peer support program. So with respect to mental health, behavioral health, there is a peer support program, and it has a high level of confidentiality. Because as it stands now, you have a level of confidentiality with your therapist, but maybe not so much with your peer support group because it's not necessarily run by a therapist. So we wanted to kind of close that. And lastly, I'll speak to you about, actually, I have two more things. With respect to a spouse who is a victim. So you all have heard of marital privilege, meaning that if a spouse could not be compelled to testify against another spouse. Okay, we all understand that. We all got that. And that's one of the good things about being married, right? Well, if you are a victim and your spouse is the perpetrator, you can be allowed to testify. This is very, 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 very important because you should be, any other victim would be allowed to testify. So just because you are the spouse or former spouse, any communication that would lead to the conviction of the crime that was perpetrated against you should be allowed to be heard in court. And now it can be. So that is a big deal when it comes to confidential communication with spouses. And last, I just want to let you all know that April, the month of April, is National Distracted Driving Month. So therefore, law enforcement might be a little bit more apt to pull you over if you're texting and driving or eating and driving or talking on the phone and driving or doing anything else but driving. You want to be careful. I heard today on the news that when you look down to send a text, the distance that you could travel in doing that could be almost the length of a football field. So think about all the things that could happen while that's going on. So I just want to say happy Safety Month, happy National Distracted Driving Month. Everyone be safe. And I don't want to, I want to make sure everyone is safe and no one gets ticketed. Last, I'll say to you that judiciary is a extremely emotional committee. We hear some of the worst situations, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the work that I do. I love the policy. I don't do math so well, so I wouldn't want to be in his committee. And I don't have a health background or insurance background, so I wouldn't want to be on your committee. So I love my committee. I love what I do. And thank you for the opportunity to tell you all about it.
Thank you all very much. I think we can open up for questions if that's cool. Glenn?
Sorry, let me start over. Thank you guys for your work, your hard work, and I can see how tired you are. I mean, it just ended. I heard about a couple other taxes. I just wanted to get a quick confirmation, yes or no, and then I have a separate question after that. Is there an additional tax on tires? It's like $5 a tire or something. I heard that. Okay. And what about Wi-Fi? Okay. The other thing is I was just doing some back of the envelope math, and 73 billion divided by the little over 6 million people in Maryland, it's close to $12,000 a person that we're spending when you look at it that way. It was 67 operations, 6 capital. So that's 73. 67 operation. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's somewhere between $11,000 and $12,000 per person. How does that compare with other states? I mean, it seems high to me, but maybe it isn't. I don't know.
For example, like in Anne Arundel, we're committing, close to $15,000-$16,000 per pupil. So those are the dollars that we're allocating here. So for example, right here, we've got $12 billion that goes to elementary and secondary education. And each jurisdiction of the 24 counties in the state of Maryland, they're between $10,000 to $15,000 per pupil, or even higher than that now. And so right there, doing a little bit of math there, that's where a lot of our drivers go. Also with regards to health or Medicaid and those programs there. And what I would say with regards to that is that, we are one of the wealthier states in the country. And, those are types of priorities and investments that we've made. And if you look at across the state, across the country too, and, we're all, Sandy, Pam, myself, we're all part of the National Conference of State Legislators and also the Council of State Governments. And these are our colleagues all across the country and also in the territories, the U.S. territories in Canada, is that we see what's going on in these different states. And, we have a lot to be proud of in the state of Maryland because of the investments that we make. And because, for example, with education numbers and the health care positive numbers that we get compared to other states in the country. So it's a direct correlation to the type of dollars that we allocate towards that. And as you mentioned, there is the tire fee. There is when you purchase new tires, there's that fee, and then also the disposal. So there's two different fees there. So those are, ways to really try to help, with regards to environmental sustainability and those areas of trying to help, with recycling. So those are some of the components there that we've done. I will say this too, that if you go back to the structural deficit chart that we saw, as Senator Bidle mentioned about the concern about that structural deficit that increases the bar graph that's going down. Thank you, Adam. Yeah. Actually, yep. Thank you, Adam. Adam's great. Let's give Adam a round of applause. Thank you. He's been great. He helped me with my homework, so I just want to thank you. And right here, as Senator Bidle mentioned, that we're really concerned about this. What are we doing about this now? What we're doing about this now is that the legislature and the governor are investing in areas that we really need to invest in with regards to emerging markets, emerging technology. So, for example, some of the investments that we made is with quantum technology, and we hope to really be a leader in that, and also with aerospace, that aerospace field there. I've been assigned to the Maryland Aerospace Technology Commission, and we're looking at aerospace zones to be able to help our partners at NASA Goddard. They're working right now on the third iteration of their satellite. It's the Nancy Grace Roman satellite. It went from Webb to Hubble to now Nancy Grace. So these are types of areas that we're really trying to put Maryland on the map. Also, Trade Point Atlantic, another really vibrant location right near us. So these are types of strategic investments that we're making to really help bring in those revenues from the private sector, from outside the state, from outside the country, hopefully, with all these tariffs and everything that we're dealing with. But that's how we're trying to mitigate this and try to really address this with quantum, with aerospace, with Trade Point Atlantic, with other types of new emerging sectors in our economy. So that's what we're trying to do to get ahead of this. Governor Moore has only been in office for 3 years. So if you hear this about, inheriting this, inheriting that, well, he's really trying to deal with this now. And we as a legislature are dealing with this now by making those investments today in 2025 to address that.
So the 600 million cut by, I guess we'll say the federal government, that you mentioned, I guess in the when you were talking about the 2026 state revenues, you said there was, of course, people have been laid off and unemployment and all of that, but then this additional 600 million that's been cut, that's aside from that. And I'm not sure, I may have missed it, but like what areas are most heavily affected by those sorts of, and I assume we're talking about the federal government's just, cutting programs like, or just not, paying allocated funds and that sort of thing. And I was wondering what, where the real federal like shortfall is coming from.
Senator Bidel, and I want Delegate Chain to definitely answer this, but Senator Bidel alluded to it, and that is the rape kit testing fund. So we learned nationally that a lot of the rape kits were getting thrown away for various reasons. I mean, not necessarily through some malfeasance. Sometimes it was just that folks didn't think that the evidence was preserved or could be preserved, et cetera. So, excuse me. So nationally, there was new funding that came to allow for nationwide for all of us to get funding to test rape kits because everybody had a backlog. So we may get hit federally with the dollars that we are receiving from the federal government to test our backlog. We also receive state money. So I am very, very proud to say that the Appropriations Committee made sure that the $4 million that could have been cut and that came through as a cut got restored to the rape kit testing fund. So I didn't get a chance to say that before, and that's about the only thing I know about the budget. Well, I should say that's the only thing I know well about the budget, and I just wanted to make sure I told you all about that happened because of the Appropriations Committee of putting the $4 million back in, which we almost lost, and we almost had a further backlog of the rape kits testing. So there you go.
Great. Thank you very much to the Vice Chair of the Judiciary Committee for emphasizing that funding. To Madam President Kara's point is that what happened was we were looking at about a $2.4 billion deficit prior to January before the legislative session started. And then once President Trump took office, the estimates came from our Board of Revenue Estimates and also our professional forecasters who have determined that because of at that time in March, the amount of jobs that were cut also based on policy and fiscal decisions that were coming from the White House, that's how those estimates were accrued, 600 million. So we as a state had to do what we needed to do to address an additional $600 million in federal funding cuts. As you can see right here, we're about $19 billion, $20 billion right here. That's 600 million. Primarily, the main drivers go to, we see what's happening with the U.S. Department of Education. That's a major concern right there. That's where a lot of our federal funding, also with regards to Medicare, Medicaid. So that's where the main drivers are as far as where we're looking at with that. And then everything else, all those other agencies that were listed on here are affected. Our local health departments, our parks, our transportation, our roads, and things like that. And we're really getting hit pretty hard. Because we had the Biden administration approved the Maryland as the location for the next FBI headquarters. That's thousands of jobs. That's really would have brought to our state, and now that has been halted. So those are the kind of adverse effects that we are having. As of right now, our understanding is that's pretty good to go, but we don't know. I mean, things happen overnight, and I think to Carol's point too is that in March it was 600 million. We don't, we're continuing to monitor that quarterly, so we get quarterly reports from our Board of Revenue Estimates, from the Comptroller's Office, from Department of Legislative Services, from these other partners that we have, and as was mentioned earlier, National Conference of State Legislators, and also our federal partners, Congresswoman Alfred and Congressman Ocheski and all of them, working with all of them, we're sharing all this data, we're sharing all this information together. That's why it's important to have good partnerships and good collaboration, which we do. And we're sharing all this information. That's how we're able to, really get as much real-time data as we can to address this.
Can,
Who is paying for the repair of the
well, there's lawsuits. We're suing the company that owned the chip, but on top of that, we're getting federal funding because we've got to get that rebuilt. And this, well, if it's not enough, they don't have enough money for the $9 billion to rebuild the bridge. Yeah. There was a limit. They could, what they say, they had $450 million of insurance coverage. Yeah, so and that's going to take a while. We couldn't wait around for that to get started. It's already, the engineering is already working with the construction. They've kind of doubled up to get it. I just want to mention, if you have anyone that has been laid off from the federal government, my website has a link for all the different services that we are providing for federal employees. So it's just pamvidal.com. My newsletters go up there. You can sign up for a newsletter, but there is a link that's a lot of help for federal employees. So in the area that we live in, we're near NSA, Fort Meade, the National Business Park, and all those contractors. And so if you know someone that's been laid off, please, direct them to my website. Yes, sir.
We don't know what they're thinking. Well, I'll say this: that as state of Maryland, we have the Attorney General, we also have Governor Moore, we have all our team working together. We have a federal consultant that specializes in dealing with the Republican administrations, Republican-led Congress. So we're working with all of them to try to figure out what is actually going on. We're doing the best we can, and I would say that's kind of where we're at right now. Overnight things happen. And if we could go back to those agencies that I mentioned about cutting, and actually Senator Bidle did a great job in, providing that does a great job in providing that resource on her website, and also reminding me of something that's why we still have all these agencies here, because we as a state realize how many federal workers in our state, and there's openings in all these agencies here. So that's why we're continuing to have these funding leveled and not cutting any additional pins or cutting any positions, because we're really prioritizing that. If a federal worker, unfortunately loses their job, we as a state say, hey, we got an open door. We want you to come work for us as a state. We love to see your passion, your talent, your skills to be able to help the people of the state of Maryland. So that's part of also reason why we're not abolishing these agencies or the other a dozen agencies out there that serve you as a state. And this is everything else presented here. This is your budget. These are allocations and priorities, investments that each and every one of you are making. So that's really goes back again to, if you do know of anyone, family, friends, my whole family, my brother, my sister, they're all federal workers. You don't think it's tough? It's tough. It's tough. It hits home. We might all be living together, but it's tough. It's hard, and it hits home. And going through this too, when as I'm going through the budget process and hearing about other families and neighbors being affected, and then you have those private phone calls with your siblings, and they're talking about what's going on. It's hard. So, yes, ma'am.
It's not budget related, but it's important. So we passed what's called Eric's Law. It's about an identification. If someone has developed a developmental disability, intellectual disability, mental health issue, on their ID card, may it be just a state issued ID card, there's a little butterfly that's going to be indicated now. And that will help law enforcement know that they may be working with someone or be in a situation where they need to handle the situation a little bit differently, because some signs are not obvious. When you're talking to someone, you may not obviously know that they have an intellectual disability. So when law enforcement, or if law enforcement asks for an identification, then they can give that. They see the butterfly, and they will be trained on all of this. But anyway, I just want to let you all know about that in case you have any neighbors or family members who could benefit from that change. Okay. Kara? Mm-hmm. Well, it would have been, yeah, you want to talk about them? Okay, right. So here we go.
Kevin's happy. We passed a bill to have 14 speed cameras on 695, 7 going one way and 7 the other, because the speeding has gotten so bad on 695. So the state before would never do speed cameras on any road over 35 miles an hour unless there was road construction. So we did pass a bill for speed cameras. I mean, if a police officer can catch one of those vehicles, the fines are significant. I mean, it's like 12 points, and reckless driving, they can be locked up immediately. And I did a bill last year about this exhibition driving, where they get out in the middle of intersections and do donuts and all that. And they've really enforced that the last year. So the enforcement's there, the fines are there, being able to arrest them, but it's catching them because police are not allowed to chase. Because when they chase, other people get hurt. Yep. And so we not at high speed. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. The revenues from the cameras will go back to state highways over the cost of actually the purchase and the management of the cameras, because somebody has to check the tickets and make sure they're valid and that the tag number was clear and all that. But yes, the excess revenues will come back to the state. So anything to help with the speed. Yes, ma'am. And of course, you have to warn. The law says people have to know it's coming. There is concern, some of the legislators are concerned about how vehicles will slow down when they see that the speed cameras are coming. They know where they are, and they slow down, which causes kind of traffic to clog up, and then they speed up again. So there's some concern about that. Yeah, they'll know where they are. Yeah. Yeah. Wait. This is a big legal question. I'm going to turn it over to the legal person.
I was looking really quickly because we had Montgomery County has an excellent drone program for law enforcement, and I wanted to see, and I couldn't remember whether or not we passed it or not, but I will know the answer in just a few minutes. I'm looking it up now. What was that? Yeah. Anne Arundel County has a drone program, but they're using it, I think, even more extensively than Anne Arundel. They're like the leaders on it right now, and so there was a bill to be able to use the drone statewide, and it's really, 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 really good because there's also a website that goes with it, and there's a cute little nickname. I can't remember the nickname of the program, but it's good because any citizen can go on the website and you get to see what's going on, and it has to be very specific. It's very detailed on just how far law enforcement can go with this, because it's not meant to be a general surveillance. It's meant to be a tool to be used to prevent crime. But if there is a car that is racing and maybe someone called it in and they couldn't catch them because we don't want anyone on the road traveling 100 miles per hour or whatever, they can call the drone. The drone can get up there so fast. It is really cool. They did an exhibit for us in Judiciary. But I will try to make sure I follow up with you, Kara, on the real name of the program that is in Montgomery County, as well as their website, and see if I can get more on what we're doing in our county. Okay. All righty.
There were 3 energy bills. One is to give rebates this year in the warmest month. There's like probably about a $40 rebates based on usage, and another one in the winter months. So that was $200 million. But there's also other bills that have to do with having the Public Service Commission do more about checking on the increases that BGE is requesting, because it's for infrastructure. And, we have a new public service commissioner and I think 4 new public service members. So it's it should be better. They were allowing, the Public Service Commission was really allowing a lot of increases for infrastructure. How many of you have natural gas? We don't have it. So have you seen the delivery charges on the natural gas? That's the infrastructure. You know, they have to be replacing lines and meters, and but we didn't feel as a legislator that, as legislators, that Public Service Commission is doing enough to check on that, and so that was one of the bills. Yes, Glenn. Right. For the coal plants? I didn't even know that. I missed that. But we also did more about solar storage and solar siting. I will tell you, though, we're 50th in the country in allowing solar siting, our state, because people don't want solar. People don't want houses near them. They don't want solar near them. They don't want windmills near them. And so it becomes very, very difficult to provide clean energy when you're dealing with so much pushback. There's also a bill about, I'm not going to say this right because it's not my committee, but about like dual siting so that we can put nuclear plants, the small nuclear plants where there's other, electrical production. We are so far behind in what we need, generating electricity. And so we buy a lot off the grid. You know this probably better than most, Glenn, but we're buying a lot of electricity off of the PJM grid, and that's why it's costing us so much money. So we have to do a better job generating electricity, whether it's solar, wind, or nuclear. We've got to generate it. Whatever you say. Yeah, but that's individually, but still, we're trying to provide electricity for companies, for data centers, for, it. Yeah, well, it's, we just need to do a better job of generating electricity. And the other thing we worked on too, we did a really good work group for AI because, there's a lot of positive and negative with AI, and we need to figure out better what we need to do and how we can protect ourselves. Yes, ma'am. You had your. Oh, yeah. We had a few emails about that. Not anything additional at this point. We've increased the fines and fees and trying to alert people about it. And, I wish we had more police enforcement. Oh, no, they can do that. They can do it now. For littering? Oh, that didn't pass. No. No, it is a real problem though. But it's also, I think I mentioned to Shirley, I was behind a trash truck that, trash was blowing off of it. I mean, just a lot. And they're supposed to be covered, and that's a big fine. And, but if a police officer doesn't observe it, then, they're not getting fined. And they just continue. Have you called the school? Okay, I will too. I'll give them a call. I have a busy day tomorrow, but I'll get to it. I know. Yeah, I don't think so. They're owned by BGE. I don't think they want you tagging sign. Well, we can suggest that. But, when they're going 100 miles an hour, they can't read it. And those are probably the same people that are littering. No, it's people are so irresponsible. I mean, I watch them throw stuff right out of their car. My
personal notice is where there's sidewalks with curbs, they're not throwing trash there. So that's why I want to get sidewalks on the Andover Road. Maybe they won't throw trash. I think they're just blowing off or something.
I know when we've walked the trail, I try to walk with a trash bag, even picking it up off the trail. And, people are out, you think maybe they're walking for exercise, but they're throwing trash. And, you can see it's a lot of food stuff. It's wrappers and cans and things from food. So, well, those people aren't walking for exercise if they're throwing out miniatures. I'm sorry. I don't think that's exercise. No, I do wish we could do more. And I just, it's gotten so bad. And I think I told you, Shirley, I actually took a ride around with the Secretary of Transportation because I see our ramps on and off that look so bad. And part of it's trash, but part of it's weeds. And, when they start mowing, they don't, they throw, yeah. I know. But, our transportation budget is really stressed. For whatever reason, we're not bringing in, and as we have more electric vehicles and fewer people paying for gas, it has really hurt the transportation budget. Yeah. It just moves it around. It cleans the street, moves the trash around. We had a couple of those in the county, but the maintenance wasn't good. They kept breaking down. Yeah. All right. Any more trash talk? Tara? Thank you all.
You're done, right? Do we have any other business? Mr. What are you? The nominations chair. Oh, Dave. Dave.
Yes, the elections for LSIA are in June. We're still accepting nominations, just to let everyone know if anyone is interested. Thank you.
Board members, Glenn, Dan, no? We're good. Okay. Well, then, thanks again to our representatives, Delegate Chang, Senator Beidel, and Delegate Bartlett. And and Lori isn't here to remind me who our next month's speaker is, but I believe it's, yes, Bob Mosier. Yep. Thank you, Elizabeth. So thanks again, everyone, and hope to see you next month. I would also like to thank Adam for all of his skills.